Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 2 premiered just a few days ago, and when I clicked to watch the first episode, it was ranked as number 4 on the top 15 shows of Hulu, and by the time I was getting to episode 2, it had shot up and was the number 1 show on Hulu, and as of recording this video, that is where it still stands. I just binged all 10 episodes of the show, and so this reaction will primarily be my thoughts and analysis as an ex-Mormon. If you don't know me, I grew up in a hyper-devout Mormon family. I served a Mormon mission, I got married in the Mormon temple, I did all the Mormon things, and I left in my early 20s. My first reaction to season 1 of this show currently sits at 1.7 million views and is my most viewed video on YouTube, so here we go for season 2. These are the absolutely copious notes I took during season 2, and I have to say that the tone and vibe of season 2 felt completely different than the tone and vibe of season 1, and there was so much to get into here that all of these notes will be linked on Patreon if you want to try to read my chicken scratch, and I'm also having a separate Patreon video just to include everything that I didn't quite get to fit into this reaction. No reaction to Secret Lives of Mormon Wives would be complete without a 44-ounce drink from Swig. I get the Texas Tab, which I think makes me kind of basic. I also have my pink sugar cookie just in case I don't get enough sugar from my drink. The beginning of this reaction will have a few very, very light spoilers, but I will let you know when the major spoilers are coming. I wanted to start with a quick clip of the intro to episode 1, just because I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Here's the beginning of episode 1 of season 2.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for this day, to be able to be together.
You're a liar.
As Mom Talk family.
Oh my God, I am gonna lose my mind.
Blessed that we can clear the air and get even closer.
If you poke the bear, the claws are coming out. Oh, I just woke up a monster.
Oh my god. I just love that they intro the season with a Dear Heavenly Father, which is how every Mormon starts a prayer. The Mormon Church, just to be clear, did not like this show. They released several statements about it. Here's one that says, "It follows a small group of women who purport to maintain their identity as Latter-day Saints while also engaging in extramarital conduct." This article is from the Deseret News, which is a news organization literally owned by the Mormon Church, so it's really not impartial. But when asked about what they thought about the show, Latter-day Saint women said it was not true to their faith and who they are. I'm sure the Mormon Church is disappointed to find out that 6 of the 9 women on this season have been fully endowed in the temple at some point. So these women are much more Mormon than the article would lead us to believe. In this other statement directly from the church, it says, "Some portrayals are fair and accurate, but others resort to stereotypes or gross misrepresentations that are in poor taste and have real-life consequences to people of faith." They don't list, of course, what the horrible, awful real-life consequences of the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives were necessarily. They just say that there are real-life consequences. Even when the first season aired, there was a whole petition online where people were trying to get the show canceled, and as much as members and the church would like to say that these women are not members and they should not be counted as Mormons, we get scenes like this in season 2. This is also not spoilers, it's just the girls sitting around the table talking, but this is the most Mormon thing ever.
How does it even start? I can't remember. We are daughters
of our Heavenly Father who loves us and we love Him.
We stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things and all places, as we strive to live the young women's values, which are faith, divine nature, individual worth, knowledge, choice and accountability, good way. It keeps going. So what they're reciting here is the young women's theme, which is something that during every Sunday when we were in young women's from about 12 to 18, you were supposed to stand up and recite this script, this statement in unison. In my humble opinion, if you are able to recite the young women's theme from memory, you get to say you're Mormon. And while a lot of them don't still claim Mormonism, it's impossible to say that the Mormon Church and Mormon culture has not had a massive impact on their lives. To list just a few other ways that the Mormon Church shows up in this reality TV show, we hear conversations about garments, for example, which is the religious underwear that most worthy Mormon adults are asked and covenant and promised to wear 24/7 throughout the rest of their lives. We see also a conversation about chanting in the temple, which you can see here is what's being depicted in this secretly recorded video. So they're literally talking about this most secretive aspect of Mormonism on the show. We also see a baking competition between the women, which has to be the most culturally Mormon thing basically possible. And within the baked goods, they have things like Joseph Smith, the golden plates, the Hill Cumorah, the temple, the angel Moroni. All of this is represented during the Great Mormon Bake Off they have. As Whitney is preparing her item for the Bake Off, she includes the letters CTR on her sourdough, which is the same acronym that I wore on a ring as a child all throughout my childhood. CTR means choose the right, and it's a huge Mormon catchphrase. As I said, 3 of the 9 women have been endowed. That means that they at one point or still wear garments. They did the thing with the crazy outfit and the green apron, and that means that they basically attained the highest level of Mormonism you really can. There's photos of many of them in front of the temple. Whitney, after season 1, made this TikTok where she's going around her house and showing all of the Mormon stuff she has decorating her walls. And Jen also says that she literally got clearance from her stake president in order to go on the show. While in season 1, Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Whitney were pregnant, even before season 2, we were seeing photos like this of even more cast members becoming pregnant. And so in the show, we also see competition between pregnancies, children, and fertility issues. I also think a winner for Utah culture this season was the Utah accent. Instead of nails, we heard Nels. Instead of I want a meal, we heard I want a mill. The Utah accent was crazy this season. And that list is really just scratching the surface of just how Mormon this TV show really is. And so whether it's Mormon culture or Mormon doctrine, the Mormon Church has completely dominated so many aspects of these women's lives. We're obviously now on season 2 of this drama, but it all started back in 2020 when Taylor, Frankie, Paul went on a live stream and basically admitted to soft swinging with a bunch of her friends and her friends' husbands. Most of the women on the show were not involved in the original swinging drama. The ones who were involved were Taylor, Frankie, Paul, and Miranda, who joins for season 2. There's another woman named Camille Monday, and you can see Taylor, Frankie, Paul, Miranda McWhorter, and Camille Monday all dancing in this video. And I think it's funny that if you go to Camille's page, even now you're still seeing in reaction to season 2, people going onto Camille's page and saying, when are you going to be on the show? We want to see you too. So the drama from the beginning is still definitely stretching out into the present day. Also, don't forget to subscribe because next week I'm sharing a deep dive into Crumble Cookie. Crumble is a Utah company founded by Mormons, and it was a very interesting story to research. So swinging in Utah seems to be a huge part of the culture, and I think there's many reasons for this. This is a screenshot of the Swinging Utah subreddit, and I think a reason for this is that when you have marriages that it's very, very taboo to get divorced. Most of these people have been married for multiple years. They have temple covenants from getting married in the temple. They have 3 or 4 kids. And so when your life is situated like this, and you got married at 18, 19, 20, you never really got to experience, quote, living your life in the way that a lot of people usually get to go on dates with lots of people and try lots of new experiences. And so I think the secretive swinger community in Utah has arisen from people who are in unhappy relationships, and quiet swinging, soft swinging, doing these sort of swinging parties is the only way for them to experience this side of life that Mormonism never allows them to experience. Within Mormon culture, I often think people turn to swinging as a way to save their marriage rather than simply having a divorce, and usually it's very, very messy from all the stories I've heard. Sometimes I call it more steps to divorce because these are not people who understand the complexity of open relationships. Often, as Taylor Frankie Paul says, people catch feelings feelings very easily. They are falling in love. It's basically like a high school romance, and there's not a lot of maturity to help the people sort out the difficulties of sleeping with multiple people. We do finally in season 2 get a scene where Taylor Frankie Paul is just listing out all of the things they were doing, and then they have Miranda, and they basically are asking her, hey, is this all accurate? And so it feels like we get a little bit more clarity on, quote, what really happened, which I swear is the title of every article written about this show. What really happened during the swinging? I'll react to that clip in a bit, but I think it's safe to say that probably not even Taylor Frankie Paul understood that when she did that live stream, it would launch a massively successful reality TV show. And according to this article, the series had the biggest 3-day premiere of any unscripted series, beating The Kardashians and other titles. So they literally beat The Kardashians. This is the cast in season 2, and if you are like most of the rest of the audience, you may notice that a lot of them look really similar, and it's hard to tell them apart. Whether it's the Botox or the lashes or the extension or the filler or the makeup, a lot of them look really similar, and that is definitely by design because there's a very specific Utah beauty standard. Even the names to me were very easy to mix up. We have Whitney, Macy, Demi, and Jessie. We also have Michaela and Miranda. Demi and Jessie are the two that get compared the most, and you can see here in the before and after photos of when they were younger and had less work done or less filler or less Botox, there's a distinct difference in the way that they look. As an ex-Mormon, I really truly feel like it's sad to see the lengths that Mormon women feel they need to go to in order to fit in the society. We're looking at what is thousands of dollars of cosmetic enhancements. I also see a lot on the internet the sentiment that you're not ugly, you're just poor, and that is definitely what I'm reminded of when I look at these photos. Not to say that they were ugly before, I think they were very beautiful, but I think that seeing women put thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, into the way that they look is to me a representation of how women are valued within this culture, which is the hotter you are, the more you are valued. I also know that some of this is just better photography and that as you age, your face is going to change, but I think it's safe to say that they have morphed to look more like each other as time has gone on. Here's a quick recap to totally bring you up to speed for season 2. This is everything we learned about the girls in season 1. Taylor Frankie Paul is the leader of the group. She's the founder of the group. She has the most followers. She also is the one from the live stream. She's basically like an imperfect heroine. And in season 1, we saw her trying to decide if she wanted to be with Dakota. She had Dakota's baby in season 1, but she didn't want to get married to him. The cliffhanger of season 1 was trying to figure out what Dakota had been doing with this other woman named Jenna, and we do get to see Jenna in season 2. Whitney was definitely the villain of season 1. We find out that her husband had a Tinder account that he was using behind her back, so we see a lot of conversations about this Tinder account and them coming back together and deciding what they're going to do to move forward. Whitney also was in the ultra-viral video where she is dancing in a hospital when her baby is in front of her and he has RSV, and she was absolutely ridiculed online for how uncaring this video was. This is Jen, and what we learn about her the most in season 1 is that her husband is absolutely horrible, and at one point in the show they go to Chippendales and her husband gets extremely upset at her and starts texting her and calling her, and this is what she says he said.
Yeah. No. What's wrong?
He said he's just done with everything.
Pardon me?
Well,
Done with everything?
he's saying I'm not going to be married to someone who doesn't have values and morals. Like,
What? He texted that?
yes, it's like, what have I done in this situation?
While Whitney was the villain of the girls on the show, I definitely feel like the true villains were Zach and Dakota. I cannot get over the fact that he's texting the mother of 2 of his children that he doesn't want to be married to her anymore just because she got dragged along to a Chippendale show. You might have noticed that the cameraman caught a pretty clear view of the text from Zach, and this is what it says. I'll also link it below if you want to read the whole thing. He says, "Seriously, I don't want to hear one more time about your heart. Start taking accountability for your actions and the situations you've put yourself in. You're a grown woman with your spelled incorrectly." But somehow he's going to be able to get through medical school. He goes on to say, "The fact you would have to ask me, I guess to ask to go, is the R word. Would you ever find Katie asking Kylie that? So that's their in-laws. That's his family, who's more Mormon. I also thought this line was crazy. The fact we are even having this conversation is sad, especially after everything with the temple. Because keep in mind, in the temple, when Jen went through the temple, she literally promised to obey her husband. That's what I promised when I went through a Mormon temple, is I promised to obey my husband. So he's literally pulling the temple card on her and saying, you promised, you actually covenanted with God to obey me in the temple, so I'm surprised that you're not listening to me right now. We left the season with Zach and Jen leaving Utah and heading to New York City because apparently he was going to start medical school there. It was so insane to go read through Jen's comments after season 1 aired because every single comment, it seemed like, was divorce him, your husband's awful, your husband's abusive. People hated Zach after season 1, and in my opinion, it's for good reason. This is Demi. She ended season 1 as the fan favorite, which is a term that takes a very interesting turn in season 2. She was so many people's favorite that when they released the promo shot for season 2, a lot of the comments are asking why Demi is in the back and calling it the Demi show because so many people liked her that much. I think a major reason people liked her so much, as you saw in that short clip of Jen being upset, is that she was one of the loudest voices of advocating for Jen to take charge of her life, to be empowered, to love herself, to say she deserves more. And so because of all of those pep talks, she really ended season 1 as a fan favorite. Demi is married to Brett, and when they first met, she was 9 years old and he was 25. And in this quote from this article, she says, "He was so much older than me. When I was 9 years old, he was married to his first wife and having babies." Red flag. Demi and Brett's whole relationship have really had a lot of twists and turns. This was a great article to get a debrief on everything that's happened within their relationship. I also found it interesting that Brett's sister was married to Larry King of Larry King Live, which is in large part why Gordon B. Hinckley, as you see in this clip, went on Larry King Live, was because that Larry King was married to the sister of Brett from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. So it's a very small circle we have here. This is Jessie. She's the founder of Jay-Z Hair, which is a massive hair empire. According to this website, their revenue was more than $14 million. It doesn't say if that's overall time or last year, but safe to say that it's generated a lot of revenue, and she, of all the women, seems to have the most money. It seems like all of the girls on the show have worn her extensions at some point, and it seems that hair business in Utah is booming. She's the one who initiated the Chippendales visit in season 1, which also is what tipped off all the crying and heartache in the scene that I showed you with Jen. This is Layla. She joined the Mormon church at 16. She was married at 19 and then divorced at 21, and she had 2 kids during that time. She's pretty quiet in season 1, but we do learn that she has never experienced a climax. And finally, this is Michaela. She was 16 when she married her husband, who was 21 years old, which was considered to be legal because Utah has a law called the Romeo and Juliet law, which allows marriages like this to take place and be legal. The age difference in their relationship really gets glossed over, in my opinion, in both seasons. I feel like I want to be like, can we talk about this? I feel like we need to debrief the age gap here and the age 16, pretty young, but we don't really get to hear a lot of information about that, probably because they are still married. They have 3 children together, and she's currently pregnant with their 4th. As you're watching this video, I would love it if you would like this video, subscribe to my channel, drop a comment below if you have theories or ideas or hot takes about season 2. I have a new video about the Mormon Church, my experience, the doctrine, the history, pop culture, every single week, so don't forget to subscribe if you want to see that. And so with that, we are ready to fully jump into my reaction to season 2. This is, of course, where the major spoilers are going to come up, so just be warned that they are definitely coming. As I already said, I grew up super Mormon, and so my analysis is going to focus in on some of the most Mormon-y aspects of this show, but I'll also be covering a lot of the storylines and sharing some clips. The first theme that really came up a lot in this show, especially in the first few episodes, was the idea of generational cycles and the impact of babies having babies. Keep in mind that in Mormon culture, there's a super normalization of keeping the family together at all costs, of getting married as young as possible, and having children as young as possible, people and then having a lot of children. This to me is a recipe for generational curses, which are really hard to break out of, because before these people's brains are even fully formed, they're already having babies of their own. They're already starting the next generation. One of the first things we learn in episode 1 is that despite people on the internet saying, please leave him, she did not. She did the Mormon thing, which is to keep the family together at all costs. Here's a clip that really stood out to me.
Within the Mormon church, it's very expected for the women to be submissive to their husbands. But for me, whether this helps me become a stronger member of the church or maybe turn away from the church, I think in order for this marriage to work, we have to be equals.
Crazy that what's implied there is that in the Mormon church, she's not experiencing equality with her husband, which when you were asked to promise in covenant with God to obey your husband, and keep in mind, the man never makes the same promise. The man never promises and covenants to obey his wife. This is a one-sided exchange. I also feel like what's so sad about this clip of her saying that is that girls are taught to be submissive and to see men as the leaders and the source of power, whether it's priesthood power or they're the heads of the family or the patriarch or they preside over the home. This is all the language you hear growing up as a girl in the church. So you really are conditioned to put yourself below a man. Even long before you even meet the man you're supposed to marry, you're being heavily conditioned to see yourself as secondary to men. This is a quote I heard all the time when I was growing up in the church, learning about how I should prepare for marriage, and it says, soulmates are a fiction and an illusion. So this is what I grew up on. And while every young man and young woman will seek with all diligence and prayerfulness to find a mate with whom life can be most compatible and beautiful, yet it is certain that almost any good man and any good woman can have happiness and a successful marriage if both are willing to pay the price. I'm sure that's what everyone wants to think about when they're thinking about the prospect of getting married or on their wedding day, that this will work out if we're both willing to pay the price. And so as a Mormon woman, when you're going into a relationship with a toxic man, you're remembering quotes like this, where if the man has a temple recommend and has a calling, that it is your responsibility to make it work and pay the price in order to ensure that your temple covenants are maintained and that your marriage can last into the eternities. Jen met Zach when she was 18 years old and they were married a year later. She then got pregnant not soon after. And so by the time she's 21, we see that with many of these women, by the time they're merely entering their 20s, they already have the responsibility of children, pregnancy, and a husband. And so they truly do not get an opportunity to experience the world, to find out who they are, to begin to forge an identity outside of their parents. They're basically going from being under their parents' roof to being under their husband's roof. I think it's safe to say that Mormon culture has not given her the space and time that she needs in order to breathe and find herself and make her own decisions and find her identity. Instead, she's immediately thrust into marriage and childbirth. Instead of taking the time from 18 to 23 or 24 to find herself, she's immediately married and has children, which I think is what is going to contribute, back to my earlier point, in this generational cycle of babies having babies, where you are asking women to have children before they fully mature themselves. That's why I think when we look at Taylor Frankie Paul's mother, why she acts like a bossy older sister and not like a mother. I truly believe that when you have kids this young, as a woman, especially in Mormon culture where you're basically expected to do it all on your own and the husband isn't helping as much, it can really stunt your emotional growth. I think the fact that they go straight from their parents' house to their husband's house is really damaging because they never get to experience living alone, having a job on their own, paying, getting their own groceries. Their experience instead is to go from one system of looking to someone else for power to a new system of looking at someone else for power. And what makes it even worse is that they've been conditioned their entire lives to be receptive to other people telling them what to do. I think that's why Jen is so continuously a people pleaser in season 2. She just wants to say yes to everyone because she was never taught to have her own identity, to stand up for herself, to view herself as equal to others. So when someone comes to her and says, hey, XYZ is going to happen, her gut reaction, which is also my gut reaction coming from a place of my Mormon me, is to always say yes, to always be kind, to always be willing to take on whatever responsibility or to consider other people's feelings before your own. I think that this is basically a form of religious arrested development, where the time where you start having kids is the time where you shift from focusing on your own development to being very, very focused on your children's development. The incredibly scary thing about this cycle is that then when those children grow up, they are going to be experiencing the same thing. And then they are going to be keeping the relationship together for the kids. And then they are going to be getting pregnant at 18, 19, 20. And so this never-ending cycle of babies having babies in 20-year cycles means that it's going to be really difficult for families to break cultural traditions, especially from a place like the Mormon Church, where gender roles are very rigid, women are seen than less than. I can't tell you how many times in this show I saw a man look another man in the eyes and speak to him with absolute respect, and then turn to a woman and treat her like shit. You can also see it in the way the women interact with each other. The women respect the men more than the women respect themselves. We see the women engage in their own version of internalized misogyny because even the women discredit and are catty and are hateful towards each other, which is why season 2 kind of was much rougher to watch, in my opinion, compared to season 1, where they did seem to be focusing more on building each other up. This idea of generational cycles also comes up a lot with Leanne's character. Leanne is Taylor Frankie Paul's very toxic mother. Taylor has talked a lot about how she's never really had a relationship at all with her dad, and we see in this situation too, where Leanne got pregnant, the dad left, and Leanne has Taylor Frankie Paul, and this begins this new vicious generational cycle. This next clip is one I've seen popping up all over social media. Essentially, Taylor Frankie Paul has a family barbecue with her mom, her stepdad, their siblings, and Dakota comes along, and they're having a huge family conversation about Taylor Frankie Paul and Dakota's relationship.
You're just so quiet, like you're just so closed off.
I'm at loss of words.
You guys were together and then not together, and then what's today looking like, I guess?
I don't know,
It's just so exhausting.
What a way to speak to your daughter. That's how I felt watching Zach. Like, what a way to speak to these women who have just had babies. They're pregnant. It's like they're in the most sensitive time of their life. And that's why it feels so crazy to watch these situations as an outsider, because you just want to, with Jen, with Taylor Frankie Paul, you just want to reach through the screen and just be like, I'll be your new mom. Let's find you a new husband. You feel like this urge to protect them because literally no one in their life is helping them or protecting them. They're all just shoving them into the ground. But I think, honestly, the reason Leanne is so emotionally immature is probably because, just like all these other women, she was pregnant very young. She had to then marry, apparently, this stepdad who also, I'll show you in a bit. I think the reason it's so easy to villainize all of these people is because they do some pretty villainous things. Obviously, they're mistreating their family members, they're yelling, they're calling them awful names, they're not being there for these postpartum women in their moment of need. And while I obviously do not excuse these people's actions, I think we need to ask what culture taught them to act this way. My struggle to villainize anyone in this show comes from my understanding of Mormon culture and Mormon doctrine, and that at one point, Leanne was a baby too. At one point, all of these people were innocent little children. And then they were raised on these awful doctrines and these awful teachings about women, about chastity, about modesty, about men and women and how they are not equal to each other. And as they're raised, they are victims of this horrible doctrine and culture. But at a certain point, they become 18, 19, 20. They have babies, and then they turn from being the victims of the culture to then perpetuating the culture on their children. And so obviously it's easy to find articles like this already, how Leanne is the real villain in Taylor Frankie Paul's life, I think it's safe to say that Leanne is coming from generations of a toxic patriarchal culture that teaches women to have babies as young as 16 in the case of Michaela. And really, they say this a lot on the show. Obviously, Jen is even saying women are taught to be submissive to men in the church. She learned that in the temple. And Zach, as much as, you know, I obviously have really strong angry feelings towards Zach, he's been raised from a clean slate of a little baby. He's been raised day after day seeing women put below men, hearing words in the temple about how women should obey their husbands, reading the proclamation to the world about how men should preside in the home and women should take care of the babies. And so Zach is not just this ghoul that popped up out of the earth. He was tailor-made by his religion. The reason that Leanne and her husband, which is Taylor Frankie Paul's stepdad, the reason that they are so condescending and judgmental about Taylor's premarital sex is because it literally says in the Book of Mormon that premarital sex is the sin next to murder. In the Book of Mormon, in Alma 39 verse 3, it talks about the harlot Isabel, and then in verse 5 it says, "Know ye not, my son, that these things are an abomination in the sight of the Lord, yea, most abominable above all sins, save it be the shedding of innocent blood or denying the Holy Ghost." So the Book of Mormon literally places fornication, premarital sex, adultery, that kind of a thing, as the sin next to murder. It is the only thing worse is denying the Holy Ghost and committing murder. And so I bring up those two pieces of doctrine, whether it's the sin next to murder or being submissive to your husband, to illustrate that these people are not just coming from nowhere. They've been taught to behave this way, and they've been taught to treat other people this way based on their hierarchy of gender, of righteousness, of wealth. These are all learned behaviors. So we've seen a little bit of what Leanne says during that scene. This is what the stepdad says about her relationship with Dakota.
Here's the thing, I'm gonna be blunt, freaking honest. And then you're sitting there telling me that he came over and had sex with you? What does that say about you? I'm not pointing fingers.
I'm not pointing fingers. Dude, you're literally pointing fingers at her and slut-shaming her. It's incomprehensible to see him take Dakota's side versus his stepdaughter's side. The Mormon hypocrisy of not being willing to say a swear word because that's so bad, but then being truly horrendously awful and not supporting your stepdaughter, and being okay with that, but not being okay with the swear word, is exactly my experience in this church, which is that morality is not morality. What's being good is not good. We won't swear, we won't drink coffee, we won't get piercings, but we'll be so awful to the women in our lives that you can't tell me you're good after that, if that's your moral calculus. If that's how your compass is operating, I just refuse to believe that this religion is actually generating good and thoughtful and kind people into the world. But to take a step back, obviously, he's reprehensible. Obviously, it makes me really aggravated and upset to watch this kind of a thing. And I'm not saying that he shouldn't be held accountable for this behavior or that he should be let off the hook, but I do think we need to consider the machine that made this man. The Mormon machine that generated all the ideas and thoughts that are going into this man's reaction to slut shaming and calling and saying, what does that say about you that you were willing to have relations with this man after knowing him for a few days, rather than coming from a position of just really trying to help these two young people. This family does not, in my opinion, seem to be trying to help her. They are judging her. They are vindictive. They are not supportive, other than Taylor's sister, who she does seem to be at least giving some words of wisdom throughout all of this shit. I think what's so scary about seeing these relationships in these first few episodes between Taylor and Dakota, their new child, Taylor's parents, we see Jen, we see Zach. I just feel like generational cycles are very scary, and Mormonism, the Mormon church, the way it normalizes very young marriage, very young childbirth, as many children as possible, it's definitely exacerbating this issue. Later in the show, we see that Jen is pregnant again, and she breaks down crying because she doesn't feel that she's ready to bring a child into this world. But they were obviously having sex without protection. And so this child will be brought into a family that is, according to them, not ready for it. They don't seem to be ready for it. And now this baby, just like their other children, will grow up in this same toxic culture unless they do something, which I do feel like, you know, as an aside, I feel like Zach improved this season. We see him really trying, but it's hard, in my opinion, to tell after how we saw him act in season 1 if this is all for show, or if this is the real him now. My husband actually had this on his gift list, and I'll put a better picture of it off to the side here, but it's essentially supposed to represent generational trauma. And I feel like that's one of the reasons I'm honestly, truly so proud of leaving the Mormon church, because I have family history that goes back to the church, back to Joseph Smith. And that is literally generations of polygamy, of women being treated as objects, of women seeing themselves as less than, of racism and homophobia and sexism and all of the dark, toxic things that are in the Mormon church's past that I've talked about on this channel. And so that's why, even though something like a nose ring or my tattoo probably feels inconsequential to anyone who sees me at the grocery store, feels to me like I'm like the little wolf that is in the picture, because you can see that the parent has chosen to say, we're not doing this anymore. We are not biting down. I'm protecting you. And that's why I dedicated my book to my kids. I said, and to my sons, this book is for you. I'm proud you'll never need to read it, because my sons will never need to know or figure out how to leave the Mormon church, because I broke the chain for them. And so, to highlight a few other portions of the beginning of the season, and keep in mind, I'm going to try to speak to as much of the season as I can. This was 10 hours of television. It was also season 2, so you kind of have to have seen season 1 in order to get season 2. But a few other things I wanted to highlight. I thought it was so crazy that when Zach walks up to knock on Jen's door, because they were supposed to go to New York for medical school, but then he, I suppose, got accepted in Arizona, so then they go to Arizona, and then in Arizona she gets upset and still frustrated with her marriage, and she decides to go back to Utah to be with Mom Talk, because keep in mind, in season 1 we saw that she was getting a lot of comfort and support and empowerment from these friends. And so she's in Utah, and Zach comes up from Arizona and basically says, I've taken a year off of medical school and I want to be committed to working things out. I do think he had so much audacity to walk into this conversation carrying grocery store flowers and a suitcase, like he was definitely gonna be intending to stay. So walking up to the conversation of, will you take me back, with a suitcase is presuming a lot. I showed you a little bit of their conversation, and she does ultimately say that he can come back. He starts living with her again. We see them go to ketamine therapy, which was kind of hilarious considering they're both Mormon, and, you know, you would think that they can't try ketamine. This is a gray area, because anything that's prescribed by a doctor is usually considered a-okay. And so even something like medicinal marijuana would be kind of like a wink, wink, and a nod, it's okay, because as long as a doctor says it's okay, you're allowed to partake. We also discover that Zach has not been attending the Mormon church recently, but if you listen carefully to what he's saying, in my opinion, he seems to be saying that because they were getting so much hate from the show, especially him getting hate from the show, he's decided to stop attending, not necessarily because he doesn't believe anymore or because he doesn't agree with the teachings, but because when he goes to church, he gets a lot of snide and angry and hateful comments, and so he's just opting out because he's not accepted anymore. They do have a scene with him in the coffee shop where he's holding what seems to be coffee. I don't know. They never address it. I wish they would have asked, and maybe they did. Because Mormons often, when you go with a member of the church to a coffee shop, if they're even willing to go with you, they would get a hot chocolate or like herbal tea or something. And so I was kind of like, oh, he got coffee. But then because they never say it's coffee, I don't know if it was coffee. I feel like within the first few episodes, and even if you go to his social media, everyone's kind of back on Team Zach. He was much more likable. He seems much more in Jen's corner. He's saying the things that he kind of needs to say. It is really difficult to know or to tell how sincere it is, how genuine it is. Clearly, according to current social media, after the season concluded, they're still together, they're still posting photos together, liking each other's stuff, and so we'll get a little bit more about what happens in their relationship during season 2 in a bit, but I had to just plug that I do not think this man is out of the woods yet, in my opinion. No one asked for it, but I'm giving it anyways, because threatening to divorce your wife, I'm not sure that you get to just walk back from that so quickly, but it's not my relationship. In season 2, we also see Miranda joining. She, as I said at the top, she was part of the original swinging drama. Here's another TikTok of back in 2020, Taylor, Camille, and Miranda all doing their TikTok dances together. Miranda seems really sweet, and I really liked her on the show. I also thought her costume, her Halloween costume, which we'll also get to in a bit, was my favorite costume. Miranda's outfit, which is the claws were so funny, reminds me of when Lindsay Lohan goes as the real Halloween character. I guess she's supposed to be like a spooky bride, a vampire bride, to the Halloween party in Mean Girls, and Regina George is just like, I'm a bunny. And I feel like her costume, instead of trying to be the hot, sexy costume, she was going for fun and cool and cute, and I just really liked her character. Miranda's relationship with her ex-husband and Taylor Frankie Paul really comes into the picture in episode 3 during the Halloween party. But before we get into the Halloween party, I wanted to talk about the season 2 effect that we see playing out on screen between how the characters looked and acted in season 1 and then how they show up in season 2. The first, which is a reason why season 2 was kind of a bummer to watch, is that so many of the girls seem like their only thing they're interested in is getting as famous as possible and getting as much screen time as possible. I feel like season 1 was the girls against the world, the girls against the church, the girls against toxic husbands and boyfriends, and season 2 is the girls against each other. I feel like everyone is hotter, but not necessarily more attractive. I feel like all of them after season 1 and seeing how well it did went out and got more filler, more Botox, more extensions, nicer outfits. Even the husbands look like they've done a lot more, whether it's working out or doing their hair, getting better clothing. It feels like everyone upped their game because they knew going into season 2 that they really wanted to show up on camera versus season 1 where they probably didn't even really know the show would be produced or aired. It was still a gamble. I feel like seeing how many more procedures the girls have gone through, even between season 1 and season 2, these changes feel really sad to me. And I know that there's a thread of thinking that says that, basically doing these procedures, if they make you feel good about yourself, you should say yes, and you should support other women to do so. And I'm not saying I don't support their right to choose to do that, but saying that I support or that I feel good about women going to such lengths to change their bodies to look a certain way, I feel like it's hard to look at that and see empowered feminism versus seeing women who are trapped by a very specific subset of rules of how you're supposed to look, what weight you're supposed to be, how to be beautiful, what's not beautiful. And for me personally, I don't see a ton of empowerment in spending thousands of dollars to change everything about the way you look. Like I said, I fully stand by their right to choose to do those things, but I'm not also going to be a cheerleader and say that this is obviously a completely good thing for society. It reminds me of this tweet, which I've shared before, which says, "I do not support all women. Some of you bitches are very dumb." Ultimately, I think these cosmetic enhancements are painful, they're expensive, they're invasive, and they're completely unnecessary. All of these women, when you see the before photos, they're gorgeous, they're beautiful. And I think it's sad to see them wrapped up in a toxic society that treats them that they have to look this way in order to be considered pretty. I think it's also worth noting that obviously the beauty standard is very homogeneous. It's very much that all of them are chasing one very specific style of beauty. It's not that all women are beautiful or that there's many different ways to be beautiful. It's that there's one very specific way to achieve this Mormon girl Utah look. They even made this TikTok together, which as you can see, they're kind of poking fun at this idea that they should be blonde. That's kind of their last thing they haven't achieved as part of looking like the perfect Utah girl. I also think people underestimate just how expensive and how difficult it is to upkeep everything that they seem to be doing, whether it's Botox, filler, hair extensions, coloring, highlights, blowouts, styling, lash extensions. You have to do teeth whitening, get your teeth done, maybe get veneers, facials, skin treatments, laser hair removal, spray tans, because they all have those, makeup, manicures, pedicures. I mean, whether it's the fitness or the fashion, if you try to calculate the cost of this lifestyle, you really can't, obviously, because for everyone it's going to be a little bit different. But when I tried to average the estimated total cost, if you were doing a moderate cost of each of these procedures / everything that I just listed off, the estimated total that I had was about $40,000. So $40,000 a year to do the initial procedures, to upkeep, to do all of these things. And so this is very expensive too. And I think that the fact that men don't almost do any of this is also a reason why women struggle with financial independence, because in order to have an entry level of beauty, if you're spending this amount of money and you're spending it since you're 16, it's actually going to be much harder to save money and to reach financial independence if you have to have this much money spent on your image every year. I also think a lot of this is wrapped up in prosperity doctrine. That's the idea that if you're more righteous, you have more money. And if you're more righteous, you're more beautiful. And that's why all of the Utah houses are these McMansions. Everybody wants to look a certain way. Everybody wants to act and talk and be a certain way. And that prosperity doctrine says that when you achieve that, you are also righteous. God is blessing you. And if you don't achieve that, it's because you're not as righteous as the person who did. However, as I've shared, when I was raised in Montana, I was raised from more of like a provident living doctrine, which does sound exactly the same. It's described over to the side here, which is much more about frugality and living within your means. And I have a lot more anxiety personally about money. I find it very hard to justify even small expenses, and really no matter how much money I do or don't have, I always will probably be anxious about money because of how I was raised to view the scarcity of money and the importance of money and learning to be incredibly frugal. So there really are multiple genres of Mormon within the church. And I think what we see most specifically in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives are women who are very much engaged in the prosperity doctrine form of Mormonism. Another season 2 effect that I listed is that everyone seems to be between 10 and 20 pounds lighter, which is very scary considering that they were really skinny and really thin in season 1. I know that this is another really sensitive issue, commenting on whether or not, or you're giving your opinion about women's cosmetic procedures is of course very taboo, and it's something that is very discouraged to even talk about, which I also find to be strange. Anytime there's something like, well, you shouldn't bring that topic up, especially if it relates to women. I feel frustrated by that, because if we don't talk about it, it's not going to get better. And so this is not coming from a place of body shaming. As I've been saying, I think all of these women are so gorgeous that you're watching the show and you're just like, wow, they're so beautiful. And in their before pictures, they're also beautiful. I think what's sad is that some places list Utah as the #1 state for eating disorders. And if you're thinking of this season 2 effect after season 1 was so big, and you're a Mormon woman who's been taught to tie thinness and skinniness very closely to righteousness and beauty, then I think that one of the levers you pull for I need to be better on season 2 is to lose some weight. I also think that part of this idea that we shouldn't be able to express concern about someone losing a large amount of weight very quickly is that I think if you're experiencing this and all that anyone ever says is, you look great, you look so beautiful, I think it means that if you're struggling with disordered eating, if you're struggling with this idea that you are never quite skinny enough, all you're ever hearing is people saying that you look great. You're never hearing someone express true concern about you. And so while it's unlikely that any of them will watch this, I think that as someone personally who has spent times of my life trying to not eat very carefully in order to lose weight, I think it's important to voice concern out of a place of true compassion and say, you are worth more than your beauty. You are worth more than your weight. You should prioritize loving yourself. We hear, and it was so sad how many times we heard these women, whether it was Jen, Layla, and in a certain moment, she says, everyone leaves me alone. Everyone will leave me. I will be alone forever. And Jen says, I'm not worthy of love. And Taylor says, I'm not worthy of love. And these women just continuously saying that they've got, they're so beautiful. They're so many people are jealous of how beautiful and how perfect their lives seem. And yet, in their hearts, they are saying, I hate myself. And so my concern for the extreme loss of weight in season 2 is not out of body shaming or judgment. It's really because I think there needs to be more voices in the world advocating for removing the shame from this, removing all the taboos from this, and being able to just say, let's have a conversation, friend to friend, woman to woman, person to person. I love you. I've noticed this thing about you. I wanted to check in on you. And so, like I said, this is not coming from a place of shaming. It's actually the opposite. It's out of worry that the impact that fame and stardom and influencing and everything is having on these women's bodies, combined with the fact that they are literally conditioned and predisposed to view thinness and beauty as part of their self-worth, is really concerning. So now I wanted to jump into what happens during the Halloween party, because between the finger wagging and the yelling, there was a lot that happened at this Halloween party. This is where Jesse and Demi really start to stick out as making some pretty petty and questionable choices towards their friends. Jessie is planning this big Halloween party at her house, and rather than just keeping it close friends, she's inviting some controversial figures that it's very obvious are going to create a stir. The primary controversial figure she invited is first a professional Chippendales dancer, which she's flown from Vegas to Utah to come and dance during the party as exposure therapy for Jen and Zach. So that's controversial figure number 1. She literally flies out a Chippendales dancer. And then she also invites a man named Chase. Chase is Miranda's ex-husband. So in the original swinging drama, we had Taylor Frankie Paul and her husband, who she divorced. And then we also have Miranda and Chase, who are together. So you can see them all dancing in this video. Chase will be bringing his new girlfriend. And as I mentioned at the beginning with the swinging scandal situation, that it's very common for Mormons who swing to catch feelings, as Taylor Frankie Paul puts it, because they've never experienced this type of relationship before. Usually they've only been with their spouse. And so this idea of falling in love seems to happen very often from the anecdotes I've heard. And so the person that Chase caught feelings for, apparently, is Taylor Frankie Paul. And so Jesse has essentially invited Chase, and Taylor Frankie Paul is a major reason why the marriage, it seems to be, the marriage between Miranda and Chase didn't work out. Though it definitely seems like there were lots of other reasons the marriage didn't work out too. And so between the Chippendales dancer and we have Chase, and what even Jessie says about making the choice to invite these people up front, she's really trying to manufacture an interesting situation here. It seems very purposeful to invite these people who butt heads and all seem to hate each other. She's really gone out of her way to make sure that these people are at the party. So this is what Macy has to say about it.
I'm getting anxious. No, same.
I really don't know why Jesse decided to invite all these people, because we have all the former swingers in the same room. It's just gonna be a shit show. I have a feeling that it's gonna be bad.
Chase is coming in.
I have no idea why Jesse decided to invite all these people. And this kind of sets the stage for the rest of the show because we continuously see between Jesse and Demi this behavior where they are creating drama, not standing up for their friends, doing things to embarrass other people or alienate other people. And it was honestly, I mean, I'll get more into what happens with Jesse and Demi throughout the season, but this is really the part in my notes where I start to write things literally like, Jesse purposefully causing most drama. I put in quotes, Jesse said, "Do you think she'll be mad?" And she kind of giggles. And so during the party at this point, Chase goes up to Dakota and the two start talking.
When Taylor first went online, I hadn't told my parents at this point, and again, I'm a returned missionary, married in a temple. So I hadn't told them that I had left the church.
Which I think is so interesting that he's highlighting this as why it was so upsetting. And what I wish everyone understood about what it means to be Mormon is that it truly is the biggest part of your identity. It is your value system. He's not just worried. He's not worried that he did the things. He's not concerned about the sin of this soft swinging they all did. He's more worried about his parents finding out and for his reputation being ruined because as a return missionary and as someone with a temple marriage, which is, what he's highlighting here, these are things that he should never do and are incredibly shameful for him to participate in. It's also crazy that he's saying that, he's really presenting himself as this squeaky clean golden Mormon boy, but he's also posting videos like this with his wife and with Taylor Frankie Paul and her husband back on TikTok. So I feel like that's why Taylor Frankie Paul must get so pissed off hearing these people talk, because when you go and look at the social media, it feels like for other people to be gaslighting her and being like, you're the problem. Obviously they're all participating in this. They are all consenting to these videos being posted. And so I'm sure that that's why she gets so upset, because I feel like they're kind of gaslighting her into believing that she was the only one that was engaging in any of these behaviors when it was obviously a group event. I also think it's so interesting. I already pointed out my tattoos and my nose ring, and it seems like he did get rid of some of these Mormon rules, but he definitely seems to have kept the Mormon misogyny. So Taylor Frankie Paul, she walks over to Dakota and Chase, and this is the conversation that takes place.
We're talking about you. Good things. The whole thing. Yeah. Okay, I'll let Chase say it. Yeah, I was saying, at the end of the day, when people ask me about you and my opinion of you, I say 98% of my interactions with Taylor are extremely positive. But also, you bring out the lowest point of my life, so I in return bring up the lowest point of yours.
What was your lowest point? What was your lowest point?
When you announced.
So they begin arguing back and forth, and the number of times that keep in mind, he never pointed like that at Dakota. Even though they're really not necessarily on good terms, the way that Chase, who he, out of his own mouth, I'm a returned missionary, I have a temple marriage, and I treat women like crap, which is probably related to the other two things to some extent. And so to see him relate to Dakota, soon we'll see him talk to Brett, and he's so respectful. He's so calm. His demeanor is completely different than when he turns around and starts talking to women. It's almost like Mormon men have been taught from birth that they should have the power of God, that someday in the afterlife they'll have their own planets, and that they will reign and rule as kings, and that their wives should promise and covenant with God to be submissive to them. I wonder what these types of messages do to the mind of a man. Chase's girlfriend during this portion walks up to him and whispers in his ear, but you can still hear what she says. She's like, stop pointing your finger at her, because the way he is doing that is so demeaning, so condescending, so disrespectful. And so she's literally like, please stop doing that. And then he keeps doing it right after she says that. This is where we get Layla's iconic line, which was probably my favorite single sentence in the whole season.
I might be regretting the guest list now. I did not foresee this happening, and if I would have known, I would have nixed like half these people.
Are you happy you're getting your little moment, Chase? So fun.
No, this is not fun.
Go talk shit on your podcast, Chase.
Don't make fun of my podcast.
It's Lame.
Layla really did make me laugh there, but I do feel legitimately really bad for both Chase's current girlfriend and for Miranda, who's his ex-wife. She's in tears saying, we have a good co-parenting relationship and I really hope this doesn't mess things up. And he then goes and walks over to Miranda and is really rude to her. And the level to which just every woman he interacts with, he's just treats them like trash. And, you know, when you see this many women saying, I don't deserve love, I feel like trash, I'm not valued, it's really not that hard to comprehend why. So it's at this point where Chase decides to leave. And as he leaves, this happens between Chase and Demi.
Your girlfriend's literally crying and just left. So I would take, like, that's probably...
Where's your husband?
He's upstairs. Don't touch me again.
So when you first watch it, you're not even aware of anything that happens purely because of the angle of the camera. But apparently he pokes her. So this is the slow-mo of him poking her. You can kind of see he like moves his arm towards her and she kind of moves back. In this clip, you can see that Macy is kind of pretending to do what he did to her. So it looks like kind of like a condescending poke. You know, he's been wagging his finger all night, he's been pointing his finger, and now he's like, looks like he's kind of poked her shoulder, basically. Where's your husband? So at this point, she runs up to tell Brett, who is getting ready with the Chippendales dancers, because Brett's going to be part of the little show they're planning. And this is what Demi says.
Yes. Me?
He just laid his hands on me.
What the hell?
Yeah. Oh shit. Like, I just woke up a monster. Outside.
Girl, are you trying to get your husband incarcerated because he's about to go beat up that man? So she literally says, he just laid his hands on me. Which, if you look that up in the dictionary, I'm choosing this dictionary today, it says to attack, injure, or punish physically, to get hold of, seize, or take. We're going to go with, I think most people would say, he laid hands on me. That would mean definition number 1, attack. So if I hear he laid hands on me, especially coming from an adult, like he laid his hands on me, that's why we see Brett sprinting out of the room. Because in Brett's mind, you've just told your husband that you've been punched by Chase. And to replay the slow-mo here, as much as it looks like this was a rude thing for him to do, it does not seem to be quite matching the description of he laid his hands on me. So Brett sprints out of the house, yells at Chase, where are you going? Did you hit my wife? Did you touch my wife? And it's good that Brett did not just immediately punch him, because things could have gotten much worse. But instead, they discuss it, they talk about it. I don't think Jordan also runs out behind them, and I don't think Jordan hears the initial explanation, because then Jordan runs up behind the men as they're kind of talking to Demi, because Chase goes to apologize to Demi, and then Jordan just starts screaming, "Take ownership! Take ownership right now!" And I think that this is the other instance where when Chase is talking to Brett, he's so respectful. He's so, like, his entire demeanor, it's actually kind of chilling to watch how much his demeanor changes, how much he's truly code switching between how he respects men and how he disrespects women. I just think too, between Jesse inviting all these people and Demi really starting this process of stirring the pot unnecessarily, I wrote in my notes, literally feel like I can't watch this, because it truly was so painful to watch this whole interaction play out. At this point, the cops show up and Jessie has to wave them away, and she even is like, have you seen this show, Secret Lives of Mormon Wives? And the cops are like, no. I also think another person in this is Dakota, in my hot take of this interaction, Dakota is basically siding with Chase. He is siding with the man. He is on Chase's side instead of Taylor Frankie Paul's side, who is the mother of his children, who he's had an ongoing relationship with, who he's apparently trying to get back with. And yet, in this interaction, Dakota is immediately drawn to paralleling and aligning himself with Chase, who is sitting there wagging his finger at Taylor Frankie Paul. I also think this dynamic between Chase and Brett and Chase and Dakota, you see it come up again with Taylor Frankie Paul's stepdad and Dakota. Basically, every time Dakota walks into the room, her stepdad is welcoming, kind. He jokes around with him. He's very boys will be boys. They make jokes. It sounds like they're just gonna go watch a football game together. They seem like they're really good friends. And the way that he treats Dakota, which is basically as an equal and as a friend, and he respects him. He just respects him. He in no way treats Taylor Frankie Paul like that. And that's why it's so frustrating to see these men switch back and forth depending on who they're talking to, because Dakota will walk in the door and the stepdad is like, "Hey buddy, did you catch the game?" And then he turns to his daughter and he's like, "What does that say about you?" And it's so frustrating to see the men act this way in so many different settings. There's so much conversation too in the show about being a man, like, be a man would do this. We hear Demi say that, be a man, defend me, a man should do this, a man shouldn't do that. The men say it to each other, be a man up. But in this culture and in this context, it's unclear exactly what it means to be a man, because if this is what they're all meaning when they say be a man, I don't think they have a great example of how that's going to actually be healthy and positive, especially towards the women in their lives. Now, if this was season 1, I honestly believe they would have all said, "Hey, that was some scary stuff. Those were very heated emotions. Maybe it's time to dial this party down. Let's take, there's multiple people who are obviously very upset. Let's take them to the side. Let's talk about this. Let's be a friend." That was the energy of season 1, was just like, hey, authentically saying, you look upset. Let's talk. We don't need to do this right now. We don't need to continue with the party or the Chippendales dance. Let's just be here to support each other in this moment. But instead, they go full throttle. They go full speed ahead on this Chippendales dance that they have contrived in order to give Jen and Zach some exposure therapy. They do show a clip of her agreeing to it where she says, they seem to be telling her in a hair salon, "We're gonna do this, Brett's gonna be dressed like this," and Jen says, "Yeah, that sounds really fun," which is definitely the people pleaser in her coming out. But they don't show if they make it clear that they flew up they actually flew up a real Chippendales dancer to come be a part of this. They also don't show if Jen was notified that she would literally be the one that they were doing the dance for. When they show the clip, it makes it sound like they were just going to have people go up and dance. She would just be one of all the people at the party watching, which is definitely not what happens. This is the clip where they're dancing up on Jess, and this is also the reaction that we can see from the side of what Zach is thinking about all of it.
Bring on the Chippendales dancers. Come on, Zach. Don't let me down.
So the dancing continues on. Jen does obviously show no, and then she's kind of gesturing no, and it's unclear if she's kind of saying, my husband doesn't want me to, or if she's like, I don't want to. You see a lot in the show, they start throwing around the word consent. Demi is like, you consented, and Jesse's like, you consent. They use the word consent a lot, and I'm like, I really don't know if you know what that means. Because first of all, you're allowed to withdraw consent at any time. That's one of the rules of consent. That's what consent is by definition, is that consent can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. And so even if she had known every single detail of what was going to happen, and then she says, no, she's literally told you she's not consenting. And from what they showed in the clip, she didn't know what was going to be happening. This is what Zach's face looks like during the dance. And it's, to me, so frustrating that Demi has gone from this awesome friend in season 1 who's like, you're of value, you should have a voice in your marriage, you should be an equal, to now she's like giving a litmus test to Jen and Zach, and she's almost taking on this role of some sort of relationship therapist and viewing it as her role to give them exposure therapy, when that is so overstepping the mark, and it's just so disrespectful. Because really, Demi goes from being somebody that was really a positive example in season 1 to being somebody who is just consistently undercutting people, being disrespectful, starting drama, calling people names, doing toxic things to her friends, and the shift was very sad to watch. I also think, which is mentioned by Zach in a later portion of the show, that this shows the complete hypocrisy of these people, where Demi is like, he laid hands on me, and she's saying he touched me without my consent, and Shay should, you know, potentially get beat up for poking me without consent, and then immediately they turn around and do this to Jen without consent, and they are like, why can't you just take it as a joke? Why can't you just see that we were joking around? You agreed to this. This is on you. Why are you a flip-flopper? Why are you fake? Why are you lying? And the storyline about Jen from after this party becomes very sad and very dark. And I think, you know, keep in mind, this woman literally left Arizona to go to Utah to get that support from her friends. She tried to go back to Mom Talk as an alternative to her bad relationship, and instead, this is how they start to treat her. And it's very sad to see that a woman who uprooted her life and was like, I'm just gonna go back to Mom Talk and have girl power with my friends and get some support, they almost universally seem to turn on her and not give her any of the support that they were voicing in season 1. Like I said, from this party, their storyline gets really, really heavy and sad. I feel incredibly bad for Jen. As I said at the beginning, Jen is currently pregnant. We see in the show her finding out she's pregnant. She's devastated. She's expressing she doesn't know if she's ready to bring a child into the marriage, but here she is. She's pregnant. She falls into postpartum depression. And other than a brief visit from Whitney, she seems to essentially be friendless. Zach is taking care of the kids. He's taking care of her. She has a scene where she says she feels like she doesn't want to exist anymore. She also has a scene where she basically video records herself talking and saying, hey, girls, checking in, and she's visibly quite upset. And Demi, she says, according to my notes, filming yourself crying is cowardly. And of the whole group, once they got that video message, Demi was by far the most critical and very dismissive. I don't know if it's because Jen had more followers. I don't know if it's because Jen got more brand deals. She got more opportunities after season 1. And from the way that they talk, I feel like there's more that we don't get in season 2 about some of the stuff that happened after season 1. Keep in mind, this show was more popular than the Kardashians. And so my guess is that in the mania that followed the virality of this show, the women really started to turn on each other. I mean, you can tell they really started to turn on each other, and that rather than being the more authentic versions of friends that they had been in the beginning, things get really toxic and backbiting and all fighting for Queen Bee. And Jen, instead of engaging in all of that behavior, she's just hurt by it. And you can see her fall into a deeper and deeper depression. And during the show, we see that she's no longer going to be on the show, and that the crew essentially said they're not going to film her anymore out of respect for the state that she's in, her emotional health. I still am left with the feeling that I don't like Zach. Personally, I feel like I know a lot of comments I've seen on people's pages is like, Zach totally redeemed himself. To me, I didn't leave the season feeling like happy butterflies, but we also only got to see basically halfway through the season before their storyline concludes. And so maybe we'll get more in season 3, or maybe she'll just leave the show. I have more thoughts about Jen and Zach, but I'm going to put them in the Patreon video. So like I said, consider checking that out after this one if you can't get enough. This also reminds me of how many comments I've seen about how reality TV is manufactured drama. I do feel like it's a bit of a gray area, because a lot of people will just say, oh, the producers told them to do that, so we can throw it away and, you know, say whatever. But, and I think it's a gray area, because if you're getting a paycheck to be on the show, some people have even said that they'll get bonuses if they do something like bring out the truth box or show someone else this is their text messages or something like that. To me, there's still a line, right? There's still going to be something that a producer might say, and they'll say, nope, you know, maybe a producer comes to them and is like, cheat on your husband. Wouldn't that be juicy? And they're going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. So I feel like it's a gray area where they might not be doing these things if they weren't on a reality TV show. They might not be doing these things if the producers weren't saying like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you did XYZ? But the fact that they are willing to do them shows at the very least that they have some accountability here. There is this pregnancy roulette scene, which does feel very contrived, and Layla is such a pushover that, well, but also maybe she just assumed no one was pregnant because nobody really knew that anyone was pregnant. So it's one of those things where, as much as we want to say, oh, it's all manufactured drama, none of it's real, or wow, all of these people are so toxically evil and deserve to die, you could take either side. But for me, it's more of a middle area where they're obviously doing this to some extent. They're being there, they're showing up, they're putting on the, you know, the white dress and walking out of the water. But there's also the question of a lot of the women are pushovers and a lot of them are easy to get to do things. So I feel like that's why I say it's a gray area. I don't know if it's all manufactured, and I don't think it's all on the women either. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. As I already said, the reason season 2 can be a bit of a bummer is that instead of the women against the church and against toxic masculinity, against the world, it's now in this season the women against each other. And here are just a few examples of that happening in the show, though I think Demi is at the center of it, and Jesse is, up until kind of the end, a little bit of the sidekick of the drama. But here are a few examples. So we have Michaela, who the whole season would not forgive Whitney. Everyone in the group has forgiven Whitney. Everyone else has chosen to move on. But Michaela, literally the whole season, her character arc is almost completely defined by her hate for Whitney. And they show for a brief point, they show that she goes to a therapist. That storyline, I wish they would have gotten more into that. To me, that was a storyline that I was like, oh, I want to learn more. This is a really important topic. This is a really important issue. But instead, we just saw Michaela over and over again refusing to forgive Whitney on any level or at all or any way. We also see Layla write Jen is fake in the box. Really, all of their reactions to Jen. Jen is going through postpartum depression. She's found out she's pregnant. She has this toxic husband that everyone was worried about in season 1. She's laying in bed. She's all alone. And her friends have completely abandoned her. Whitney does briefly support Jen and shows up at her house, and Jen says how unhappy she is. But we don't see Whitney really going back to Jen's house. You know, we see one other shot of her kind of texting Jen, but it seems like Whitney prioritizes getting back into mom talk over being an authentic and good friend to Jen. And so once again, we see the women prioritizing fame, being in the show, being in the spotlight, trying to be Queen Bee, prioritizing that over true and loving friendship. So there's that as an example. There's the example of Jesse inviting Chase to the party despite knowing that this situation with this ex-husband is very tense and very complicated. This brings us to Demi, who is the number one example of this in the show, and I think why the show ended up feeling like tricky and tough and emotional to watch, because we see just how many times Demi is backstabbing friends, being rude, being snide, being catty. For example, we find out that she tried to cut Jesse out of the show so that Demi could earn more money. And when she's asked about it, she says that since Jesse already has her money from her hair and she already has wealth, that Jesse shouldn't really care about being kicked out of the show because she already is rich. And so she's literally willing to cut her own best friend out of the show. They say that they were on the phone with their lawyers. So you suddenly get the sense that there's a lot more here that we have not discovered. Taylor also reveals in another portion that Demi said that Jesse was bad at hair, and that basically that she's not good at dyeing hair, she's only good at extensions, and she told Taylor to go try another salon. And for Jesse, her entire life is hair, that's her entire business. She's worked on this business for years, and she's saying this about her best friend. And when she's asked about even wanting to kick Jesse off the show, Demi is like, well, I wasn't best friends with her at that point. And it's just time and time again. They'll all even be, they'll all be hanging out, they'll be eating snacks, and Demi will be like, so are you getting divorced, Jen? And it just continuously feels like she is trying so hard to alienate the more popular members of the group. She also tries super hard to kick Taylor Frankie Paul out of the group, which fucking backfires, and it's really nice to see that it does not work. But it's just so sad because I remember the scene where the women are all sitting together at the restaurant after Chippendales, and Jen is crying, and it just felt like a big hug. That scene literally made me tear up and cry because it just was so beautiful to see these women showing up for each other. And that's why this season emotionally was a disappointment. They did, they got the reality show drama, I suppose, that so many people crave, but it was really sad to see them turn on each other and try to just fight for the scraps of followers and fame rather than maintain this authentic friendship and sisterhood that they had been beginning to cultivate in season 1. It's also so sad that when a lot of these arguments are playing out, all the other women are just sitting there silent because they don't want to pick a side, but they also don't know how to stand up for anybody. And it's just so sad to see them all almost disassociate. Especially, I feel like Layla, I felt very similar to her when she's just like, she's kind of just like overwhelmed by this extreme arguing around her. And I think that's my go-to emotional state when there's a lot of arguing and it's really emotional, is to just totally shut down. But it was just sad to see that instead of this warm togetherness, now it's just this fight for Queen Bee. And even after all these things happen, whether big or small, no one is forgiven for any missteps. So, for example, there's a huge scene where Jessie says she has to get to the bottom of why Jen was claiming to be related to Ben Affleck. And it just feels so inconsequential and petty. Like, if I had a friend who was like, I'm related to a celebrity, and then even if they said it on national television, and then later they're like, I found out I'm not related to them, I'd be like, oh, it's such a non-issue. Compared to hiring Chippendales dancers to dance on Jen while her husband watched, I don't know if the Ben Affleck thing needs to be this big of a deal. And even Zach's reaction to her bringing that up, I feel like I felt so bad for Jen every time she was on screen because it felt like everyone was manipulating her people-pleasing tendencies so that she was always being pushed to the bottom of the barrel. Miranda even says at one point on the show, she's like, I'm really starting to wonder if this is what women supporting women look like, because it doesn't. And I truly feel like, somebody made a video about my content, because I've said before I'm a feminist, and they said that I discourage everyone from having children. They were like, she thinks that no one should ever have kids. It's like, first of all, I have kids. I have 2 kids. Second of all, I've never said that. But I truly believe that you think that that's what feminists all think, that no one should ever have children, that we should all just be one very specific type of woman. And it was funny to hear her say that, first because I've never said that, but also because I am sure that that's what she thinks feminists believe. And seeing these women supporting women, seeing them throw out words like sisterhood and togetherness and mom talk, can mom talk make it? And then just destroy each other and tear each other down. It really just felt like they know the words to say, they know therapy language, they know even feminist language about, this like idea of women supporting women and women should be equal to men. But I feel like almost like because they've never seen it potentially mirrored or shown how this works in real life, they truly cannot access the behavior, especially with fame and money and followers and influencing on the line. By the end of season 2, they're really just starting to discuss mom talk like it's a business much more openly. They're saying we have to maintain our image for brand deals. Demi is like, we need to have a board meeting. We need to vote people on and off. And Miranda's at one point is like, I've never heard of a friendship where you get voted on or off. It's just the definition of Mean Girls. And so it just feels like we've evolved so quickly from what we saw in season 1 to this, like, we are all here for ourselves. We're all trying to make our own money. We're backbiting. And I do think that this is led primarily by Demi, which is why I'm glad that finally by the end, Jessie is like, I'm not doing, even Jessie is like, I don't think we're going to be friends after this, and if you see the comments that Jesse is leaving about Demi, you can see that they've really fully parted ways. I'm going to fast forward to what was, in my opinion, the most Mormon part of the show. I showed at the beginning, it's when the women are reciting the young women values. So here's that part of the show. I feel like this entire scene needs like an ex-Mormon debrief explanation because they get so deep into the weird Mormon doctrine.
As we strive to live the young women's values of our faith, divine nature, individual work, knowledge, choice and accountability, good works and integrity. Yeah. Wow.
And virtue. They added the virtue part after I graduated from high school, but they added a new level of virtue so that we can all remember our chastity.
In the Mormon church, once a woman turns 13, we have this thing called Young Women's that you go to. Young Women's basically is learning about the church. They also do activities so that you can bond with other girls and bring them together and form a community.
It's so weird to hear it like that, though, because like having it in a chant like that, I'm like, we are a cult. Like that sounds so crazy.
Oh, have you ever been to the temple?
Of course I have.
Oh, temple chanting mentioned. So what she's referring to is that when you are in a temple, which I have a whole deep dive, which is this video explaining what happens in a Mormon temple, it's absolutely the most secretive part of the Mormon church. And in the temple, there's a certain portion where you are expected to chant and you say, "Oh God, hear the words of my mouth" 3 times. So that's what you see off to the side here. And I think it's crazy that they are taking this young women's theme, and I've also had a video about that, about personal progress and how much that is treating you and teaching you and indoctrinating you to be able to prepare to be the most perfect wife and mother, and that is your divine role as a woman. But mentioning the temple here is especially interesting. I also think that it's surprising that Demi is forgetting that Jessie has been endowed. She had her first marriage in the temple, so she definitely knows that there's chanting in the temple.
I forgot your first marriage.
Yes. In Latter-day Saint religion, the temple is very sacred and holy, and you need to live a certain way. And you go through an interview process through your bishop to be worthy to enter the temple.
So I'm going to pause on this portion. You can see that 2 of them are on their phones. And in any conversation filmed on this show, I almost never see this many people on their phones. You'll maybe see one person picking up their phone, but it's like almost immediate that people start picking up their phones. And my theory behind that is that because the temple is so secretive and so taboo to talk about, especially Macy in this scene, Macy is the most active, in my opinion, of all of them. She is glued to her phone, and you can almost see her sinking into her phone because she really does not want to be part of this conversation, because anything to do with the temple, just like Whitney just said, is super, super sacred, in my opinion, secretive, and it means that a lot of them totally turn off when this subject gets brought up.
I don't believe, but if I did,
You don't believe any of it? Do you believe the afterlife of it?
Yeah, in a sense, like some of it for sure.
I mean, it's core Christian values.
Yes,
I
exactly.
very much like resonate with the core Christian values, but like they weren't uniquely Mormon.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's how I.
So you don't believe that the Book of Mormon's true?
Yeah, I feel like, how do we really know? Like,
oh, I feel like Demi. It's funny because in season 1, Demi was a sinner, but she's posted a lot of pictures of her in front of church. Brett also during the Mormon Bake Off is like, that's sacrilegious. Just the whole vibe of them. In season 1, we also see him bring out her temple bag. So originally I thought she was less active or ex-Mormon, but this Book of Mormon question, along with all of the other things I just mentioned, reveals, in my opinion, that she is much more believing and active in the church than we thought as an audience initially in season 1. I do have a whole video about the Book of Mormon too, if you want to check that out. There's a lot of reasons we can know the Book of Mormon is not true.
This freaked me out is when I was trying to get my sealing canceled, my bishop was like, yeah, well, if you don't
don't get it canceled, technically, like, you're sealed to your ex. And I was like, ew. Like,
that doesn't change. He's still sealed to you.
But he didn't, if you don't get your sealing broken, your sealing is your marriage, then you're still married in the eyes of the church. And they believe that after you pass on, you're sealed forever, for all time and eternity. So technically, I'm still sealed to my ex-husband, which means we would be together in the afterlife and I wouldn't be with my current husband.
Crazy, but also completely true and very much Mormon doctrine. What's also crazy, which we're about to have referenced, is that if her first husband goes off and gets sealed to a new woman, then Jesse, under Mormon doctrine, is going to be a sister wife in heaven. So Jesse, if you're watching this, the one way to get rid of that is to remove your name entirely from the records of the church. You have to excommunicate yourself in order to actually get a divorce from your first husband. Either that, or you have to find a new Mormon man to marry you, and that's basically one of the only moments where you can break a temple sealing, is if you find a new man to attach yourself to.
Really hard for my family when like Chase first left the church was because Chase had like removed his records, which means that I'm no longer sealed to my children, because essentially you need a man in order to be in the highest degree.
And can't they have multiple eternal families?
Yeah, why?
So Michaela, that's why this scene was so crazy, because they know this Mormon doctrine shit to the T. They know it. The church has to claim these people. Sorry. This multiple eternal families thing that she takes note of is what I was just talking about, where the man can have multiple temple sealings. And in Mormon doctrine, you can be a polygamist in heaven. So it's very interesting that she doesn't use the word polygamy in heaven, but that's the teaching. A woman can only have one husband, but in the Mormon afterlife, a man can have as many wives as he gets sealed to on earth. So if you have your first wife pass away, you can marry a second wife. You're sealed to both. In the afterlife, you have two spouses. And that's the case for the current president, President Nelson. His first wife passed away. He married a woman that had never been married before. And so he's sealed to both of them. He'll be a polygamist in heaven. That's just Mormon teaching. That's Mormon doctrine. It's also crazy how they're just having this very frank conversation about, Mormon heaven really doesn't make a lot of sense for women. If you're dreading the afterlife, I used to, as a Mormon wife, I would consider the fact that if I died and my husband remarried, I would have a sister wife. And I lived with the belief that that was the case for my entire time I believed in the church. From when I found out about polygamy in heaven till I left the church, I'm just dreading the fact that if I don't outlive my husband and then he remarries, then I will have a sister wife in heaven and I will have to share my husband for time and all eternity.
You've been through the temple, right, to me?
Yeah. You have, I have, you have. Just have not.
Nope. One day.
Did you see the whole conversation? Macy is glued to her phone because she does not, in my opinion, she does not want the kickback that's going to come, the judgment. Keep in mind, Zach is not attending church, not because he doesn't believe, but because of the way people are treating him. She does not want to be in this scene of the TV show because she knows the temple is off limits. And that to me is why I named my temple video the day I realized I was in a cult, because it is so secretive and people fully shut down when you bring up the temple around them because they are so programmed to never see that part of the religion. It should never see the light of day. It should be completely a black box and should never come to the surface. And so I feel like just seeing how many of them were like emotionally avoidant when the temple gets brought up was really interesting. This takes place in episode 5, and this was really the break off of Demi becoming the villain of the show. I mean, she's kind of been working on it, but I feel like this scene really captures the line that she says that dominates her entire character. Taylor Frankie Paul brings up that Demi has apparently said that she thinks she deserves the biggest brand deals, and this is Demi's response.
It's not a shock that I was a fan favorite. I feel like I'm an asset. I should fight for more.
Demi wasn't even originally going to be casted for the show. Do you really think that you're the star? You're the star? Nah, I don't agree with that.
Taylor's like, and honestly, if you look at their social media, Taylor has almost double. This is a chart of their social media. You can see that Taylor has almost double the number of followers as the next person down. And Demi and Jesse are kind of down more at the bottom of followers. So even if we're just going by math of what the producers of the show are going to be looking at for who's getting the screen time, just the raw numbers are that Taylor is the star of the show. And Demi even at one point is like, what is this, the Taylor show? And I think the audience is like kind of like, I think it kind of is. I mean, she did the live stream. She was the soft swinger. Like, she has the most, you know, I'm not saying that she is like deserving all of the fame and glory or whatever. And even Taylor is obviously not saying that. But I think that because Demi got so much love for how she was in season 1, I think it really went to her head. Later, we see that she literally tries to vote Taylor off the show or out of Mom Talk entirely. And she's like, we need to have a meeting. It really is strange to watch because she has a Christmas party. And then after the Christmas party, she lines everyone up and starts giving her orders of like, this is what we do next. So I think we just need to get Taylor off. And Taylor's crime is that she called the girls out for not liking a post where she was at the CMAs. And yeah, like, it didn't seem great, but I feel like Demi was just waiting for something to go wrong so that she could put the final nail in the coffin. And like I said, it is sad to watch. It's sad because first we have someone like Jen who is obviously going through very severe issues. And I feel, of all the people on the show, I feel like the worst for her and hope for the best, you know, for her recovery. But then we also have all these other people who Demi is just systematically trying to, you know, Jessie is her best friend. And then she's like, she's bad at hair. And then even in a later scene, she's like, it's just hair. What's the big deal? And Jessie just looks at her like, this is my entire life is hair. I literally do your hair for free. I do everyone's hair for free. And I think that's why I've seen a lot of people lumping Jessie in with Demi, and I totally see why, because they're best friends. The only thing is that Jessie seems like she was pretty loyal to Demi as a friend, and Demi backstabbed even Jessie. Even Jessie was not a good enough friend for her to not backstab. And so that's why I differentiate the two. I would say that Demi seems like the most, she truly was letting this whole fame thing go to her head. I do think that Demi and Brett are prosperity doctrine, which is the doctrine that the richer you are, the more righteous you are. And the fact that they are both much more active in the church than we came to believe, you know, in season 1. I think that they are prosperity doctrine in the Mormon church completely defined. If you're looking up prosperity doctrine in the dictionary, it's a picture of the two of them, because money is truly the highest value. There is nothing more important or better than getting as much money as you can. And based on how she acts in all of these situations, I think that it becomes clear that the money was much more important to her than her friends. As I mentioned at the beginning, and when the promotional materials came out for the show, the editors put her all the way in the very, very back, which, based on how she was perceived in season 1, everyone was like, what is she doing in the back? And I think the editors are so petty because they are literally putting her in her place. Literally, they designed her to be in the back because they are, you know, I mean, they seem to be messaging pretty loudly, you're not the most important person on the show. And I think season 2, we finally get the answer to the questions of all these people being like, why is Demi in the back? It's because the editors wanted to put her in her place. The season ends with Layla going to Marciano. Marciano was in Vanderpump Villa. There was a whole drama between him and Demi, and Layla's trying to get to the bottom of it. He basically says that he kind of had a crush on Demi, but it wasn't reciprocated. But he drops the bombshell that he has been hooking up with Jessie. There's also been a lot of rumors online that Jessie is getting divorced, like this Reddit post. But I just went on their social media. Jessie is liking Jordan's stuff. They're liking each other's stuff. They're commenting on each other's stuff. So even though there were divorce rumors, from how it looks right now, it's not clear if that's going to go through. At the end of season 2, it says to be continued, which definitely feels like they're promising us a season 3. I will, of course, do a reaction for season 3, though binging this much TV in a weekend is tiring, even though it really, like, watching TV should not be tiring, but maybe it's because I'm taking copious notes and I'm just like trying to make my extremely long outline that it makes me feel like a crazy person. And just a hint, if you're feeling like a crazy person, drinking this and eating a cookie didn't quite do the trick for calming my nerves. So I feel like I talked about a lot, but I also simultaneously feel like I barely scratched the surface. I know I've been saying there's gonna be a Patreon video, so if you want to continue the party over there, it's already posted. I'm going to talk about the Mormon Bake Off because that was hilarious. I'm going to talk about the pregnancy roulette. I was really hoping to get to that in this video, but it's already going to be really pretty long, so I'm going to talk about the pregnancy roulette. I'm going to talk about the therapy scenes with Natasha Heffler. Symmetry Solutions is actually the same company that I've used for therapy in the past, so it was really cool to see the company that I've received therapy through, see that in the show. I was like, Symmetry Solutions. They've got my back. I'm also going to share my reactions to the scene where Taylor and Miranda talk about what did happen during the swinging scandal. So there's going to be a lot in that Patreon video. If you want to check it out, I'll link it below. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. Let me know all your comments and theories and hot takes in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're in the mood, and as always, I will see you all next week.